appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. But before I was a physician, I was a Navy officer, a U.S. Navy officer for 25 years. And we're going to talk about a war. We're going to talk about the fact that this is something actively going on in multiple nations, very carefully engineered, and I think it would be important for you to learn how to understand this. This is not a subtle thing. This is a civilizational threat thing, and I want to convince you of that. Volatility. So, first of all, gorgeous image out of a volcano. That is a representation of the volatility that is the main weapon associated with information warfare. Volatility is used to amplify tools for information warfare. It is used to engineer volatility, and we weaponize volatility to achieve objectives in order to divide and conquer at any opportunity. And this is not by any means a bloodless war. This is something that is using the 8 or so major neurotransmitters, shifting in ratios through psychographics, through a careful science of understanding what generates fear, what generates anger, what generates disgust. And it's exploiting our own neurochemistry to create digital weapons that then become political and physical violence. It is biological warfare that is designed to tear society apart. The New York Times did a very interesting article, series of 3, about something called Operation Infection with a K, that came out of the Soviet era, that had 7 major ways to use information warfare to divide nations, to divide people, to divide industries. And it said, find the cracks, anything that could be a wedge, race or religion or wealth and poverty or nationality, anything at all that has a crack, drive a wedge in there. Tell a big lie, like the U.S. Secretary of State is running a child sex ring out of the basement of Comet Pizza in Washington, D.C., and buried in a kernel of truth, because that kernel of truth was the fact that somebody on Secretary Clinton's staff from time to time ordered pizza from Comet. That's all it takes to begin to spin up the conspiracy. Make sure that nobody understands that it's you as an outsider that's doing this. Make it look like it's a local effort. Find somebody who's stupid enough to echo what you've begun to try. As somebody accuses you of making that useful idiot do that thing, deny, 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 and don't expect anything to happen fast. It might happen over a very long period of time. Get back. There we go. So, one more. Thank you. It must go one more. There we go. There is an interview from a KGB colonel, Major General actually, back in 2007, where he explained exactly what active measures were being used to do. Weaken the West, drive wedges in the institutions we find valuable. And it has worked. If you look at that graph, you see that over time, since 2001, the U.S. has lost trust in a lot of its institutions. Fact-checking is certainly an effort that is underway. There are perhaps 140 easily recognized sites on the web where you can go to check out information. But out of a publication in Columbia in 2015, we see that the actual false information is traveling 3 times faster than any fact-checkers can come up. And it's just not going to be possible for anybody to counteract effectively the false story that was plausible when it first came out, and there was a predisposition to listen to the false narrative. Weaponized cognition is what we're talking about. We're talking about weaponized ways of thinking, and we're test subjects in the largest cognitive and behavioral experiments in human history, and our citizens need to think much better than they currently do. We have the rule of law and NATO and the EU and many, many other ideas that we worked hard through the Enlightenment to derive at risk, because to dismantle those would make other opportunities present. We would be weaker as a civilization. Now, in Ukraine, IREX has done a very nice job to begin understanding what it takes to teach citizenry, the Learn to Discern program. That has also been moved nicely into Finland. Finland got started early when the president of Finland said, we see information warfare coming. We have recognized this kind of thing as propaganda for most of a century. All of you in Finland need to work with us on this. And according to at least one Finnish journalist, NATO is at the core of a lot of the efforts for dismantling. There is, therefore, across the Baltics as a whole, but particularly in Lithuania, in Latvia, and Estonia, a group of ordinary citizens that watch what's going on, and they begin to act on the efforts that are being made to inject false information by putting out true information to counter and to sensitize their population that, yes, these are the things that are going on. We call what they're doing cognitive thinking, cognitive neuroimmunology, working on the biological warfare that is trying to shift what's happening in our own biotransmitters. Let me have Brett Horvath take over to talk more about that. Brett?
What Eric has opened up is both a scary and exciting time in this space. We can finally begin to talk about what's really going on. This isn't just about fake news and hashtags. This is about information that affects our cognition and therefore our physiology and has measurable real-world outcomes. And understanding that narratives don't just stay in digital, they have consequences, and memes can become behaviors. Memes as going viral is seen as a kind of a cute metaphor, but actually the original academic proponents of memetics saw memes as basically thinking about information as an extension of our biology. And we kind of lost that over the last 30 years. And we think it's critical to start measuring this phenomenon as a public health crisis, as information epidemics, and to see the extension of information and digital phenomenon into our biologies, our physiologies, and the ecologies we all live in. So my company, Guardians.ai, we protect pro-democracy groups around the world dealing with information warfare. We've worked with Fortune 100s and presidential campaigns and public institutions. We identified what ended up being the largest influence attack on the US midterm elections in 2018. It was undetected, and they were spreading narratives that the election was going to be stolen, that there are going to be millions of illegal immigrants voting without permission, and these accounts that were foreign-based and domestic were not only spreading lies, but they were infusing violent tones in them, basically saying if illegal immigrants were caught voting, that there should be blood in the streets. They were trying to incite civil war. And so what we did is we started identifying, mapping those attacks, and then creating rapid response in order to get out to pro-democracy groups, over 40 NGOs that were trying to protect voting rights on the ground. We got it out to government sources to let them know that these attacks were coming and they may expect violent incidents at polling locations. And then ultimately got it out to media, got it on national media, print, and TV. But this is part of the process of cognitive neuroimmunology. It's both fighting the memes and the narratives on the networks, but making sure they don't hop from the online networks into the physical world. We were very concerned that we would see violence happening in polling locations, and we're seeing this more and more in elections all throughout the Western world. Now, when we talk about this fusion of digital and biological, there's unfortunately no clearer example than the New Zealand mass shooting. We've had long conversations the last 20 years about what's the role of story and ideas in mass shooting events. This couldn't have put a finer point on it. The shooter had memes from forums that he was a part of that were targets of foreign active measures. He took them as stickers and printed them on his gun and then live streamed the event, which then went to these same forums and then they spread it out. Right? This was a nexus of biological, physical outcomes and digital memetic harm. So we're now entering a space where there are no isolated incidents. We're in a war of weaponized cognition and then coordinated narrative structures. It's not just fake news. How can you take a compelling mythos that a country has or a famous celebrity and then sync that with a compelling narrative that could be true or false for a specific weaponized outcome? And then what does it mean to not look at these things as just fake news that need to be fact-checked, but as something that it could be seen as a digital biological pathogen? We need to understand these as attack patterns, but also the emergence, right? Not everything has to be a foreign influence attack to be dangerous, right? Someone could launch a influence operation at a certain country and it spread to other countries that wasn't even the intent of the original operation. These memes don't stay in hashtags and online forums. They mutate and hop from medium to medium, from machine to human, and from niche communities to entire countries. And the problem is that economic incentives, technology, and authoritarian nation states are accelerating all of it, right? If you were concerned or kind of confused about misinformation, information warfare, now is a good time to study up. If you are the CEO of a company, if you are a government administrator, if you are an activist, if you are a citizen, this is not going away. The fundamentals are making this problem get worse at an exponential rate. And we have to come to terms with the fact that while there's great conversation around innovation and the possibilities of the internet is no longer an open protocol with apps. It is an information ecology with increasingly pervasive economic and experimental incentives that are creating this growing palette of on-demand cognitive interventions. Facebook has a platform that will allow advertisers to basically buy predictive models of, can you get someone to go to a physical location, right? These same tactics that Silicon Valley has spent 10 years developing is a palette of cognitive interventions and experiments that are being run on populations all over the world. And some of them are benign, right? Some of them are just companies who want to reach their customers. Some of them are activists that want to have really engaging conversations. But there are a lot of nefarious actors, criminal networks, manipulative domestic political organizations, foreign nation states, or corrupt authoritarian governments, or governments that want to be authoritarian. So how do we fight back? Number one is we need to reclaim the principles of democratic societies and open markets. I hear all the time, I get asked, is this about fighting fire with fire? Do we need to spread fake news and launch botnets? And to me, I say that is not a viable offensive or defensive strategy. We need to own the principles of what it means to be an open society and say, we will vigorously defend anywhere online in the physical world what we stand for open markets, free speech, for fair representation. We've got to build our offense and defense around our principles. Two is enlarge the defense of those principles through these civilian military coalitions, right? We need to get groups of citizens working together to fight back. I gave a TEDx talk in Lithuania in early 2016, and I learned of citizen militias getting together to identify Russian misinformation campaigns and to organize counter-messaging and to educate their fellow citizens. And then finally is we need to activate a civilian public health and science response to treat these as pandemics. We need the disinfection, the vaccination, and mimetic resilience, right? We don't really have good tools for understanding misinformation and information warfare. We don't really have the algorithms, the scientific models, but we do have public health models. We do have public health systems. We do have biological models, genetic supercomputing frameworks, right? I kind of think of it when FDR went to Detroit in World War II, and America didn't have factories to build Sherman tanks or B-17s, but did have Detroit to build cars, right? We need to have a similar mobilization of the scientific and public health community for this problem. It can't just be politicians and journalists and the military acting alone. We need science and public health sector activating as well. What have we learned over 3 years of fighting this? I appreciate what Elliot said. I think it represents this, is learn faster than you code or procure new tech, right? It's just not going to work to have the best tech. The most advanced adversaries use technology busting tactics, what we call TBTs, right? They're going to move outside of whatever the latest tech you built or bought, and you've got to be learning faster. The next is to move away from dependence on one big net and magical AI, and instead focus on augmented intelligence, which is designed to accelerate the learning between the humans and the machines inside of your organization and then between organizations. So many of these problems, the most sophisticated attacks require multiple organizations to work together on this problem. You can't do that if you're just relying on one tech or your tech can't talk to each other. Think about what you can do from augmented intelligence to make that happen. I've got 30 seconds, it says right here, so I'm going to take it. Number 4 is get aggressive. Go on the offense through defensive principles. Fight back through defensible active measures, right? Be aggressive, but be able to defend that if the New York Times or a media outlet gets it. Finally, don't trust your maps, don't trust your data. And we've seen these malignant actors that are trying to make all societies, all communities divided, weaker, and to use these new kind of information weapons and systems against us. We want to help society and collaborate with anyone who's interested to fight back and defend open societies and markets. And we call on corporate, military, and government groups who want to help defend their own society, their own company, and to work together to defend democracies around the world. Thank you very much.